Hi, this is Martin Drummond with Progressive News, Sunday, June 30th, 2019. And I've been covering the Liberty Report. I mean, I've been putting it into my progressive playlist. If you're familiar with my Facebook group, Progressive News, then you'll know that I produce a progressive playlist, YouTube playlist every day. And I've added in Ron Paul because we agree, progressives agree with him on, a lot of things. I mean, there's things that we completely disagree on. This Ayn Rand kind of bullshit. If you don't know, Ayn Rand and libertarianism is all about basically eliminating the government in favor of an oligarchy, which is really what we have right now. A hybrid, though. It's a hybrid between an oligarchy and a pretend government. Whereas what we need is a real government. Not the fake one that we have to, the illusion to pacify the people, right? The masses. Anyway, so, I started putting him in my playlist, and now you see him popping up on the Jimmy Dore show. So obviously they are watching me and copying me. But Ron Paul, the problem with him is that he's, so like you take his son supporting restaurants being allowed to not allow black people in their restaurants. So you're saying, oh, it's privately owned, and therefore the person should be allowed to, well, it's not a restaurant isn't a private institution, right? It's a public, it's open to the public, right? So of course we should have laws. We have laws. I mean, the fact is, we even have laws governing what we can do in our own homes. You can't murder your wife just because, oh, well, it was in my house and I decided murdering my wife was a good thing to do. I mean, this whole nonsense of people can be allowed to do whatever they want just because they have some kind of proximity to it. It's like, we've decided that, and I think rightfully so, that at some point a fetus becomes a baby, and at that point it becomes an American citizen and is protected under the law. And I agree. Women shouldn't be given they shouldn't be able to murder their own baby. Once it's a baby, well, just because it's in her stomach doesn't mean that she has the right to murder it, right? So, and as far as women jumping up and down about, well, we can't tell we're even pregnant, and I don't know when, whether it's 6 weeks, 6 months, it becomes a baby. I say it becomes a baby at the point where it's self-aware. So like, it's like, I'm alive, where am I, what's going on? I can see that would be quite disconcerting. to be in a womb all of a sudden be like, whoa, what is this? And we're going to make it that much worse by killing it, right? So we let the scientists decide when. Now, as far as women saying, and I've got a whole thing on abortion, so you can go watch it. Just go through. You can probably page search it, by going to my playlist for which you're watching right now. You're in the playlist. You can probably find it by just doing a find on that page with although YouTube has some kind of problem, it only shows 100 of the playlists, so you probably can't find it. It's probably beyond 100. I'll probably have to split up my playlist for my Progressive News with Martin Drummond playlist, split it up into, because I know it's nearly 300 segments long now, because every playlist, every video I ever did is in the playlist. So, as far as women, when they can, or how early, well, listen, when you had sex. So you had unprotected sex, you weren't on your period, which means, you could get pregnant, right? I mean, women know. So it's up to you to catch it before it becomes a baby. If you want an abortion, you need to. I mean, maybe you take the abortion pill, after you have sex like that, or whatever you have to do. But, part of being a progressive has got to be addressing the grievances of everybody, and that includes conservatives. So conservatives have a problem with abortion, right? We don't go and say, okay, yes, every woman, no matter what, has to keep a fetus. No, they don't have to keep a fetus, but they have to keep a baby. You can't, I mean, come on, man. We tell baby jokes because it's so horrifying, the idea of killing a baby, that it becomes a joke at some point, and that's just the way humor works for human beings. So you can't go killing babies. We don't give women the right to take the law into their own hands. Laws are created to keep people from doing things that, as a society, we've determined are wrong. And we've decided killing babies is wrong. So no, we're not going to say, well, just because you're a woman somehow, and women have the babies, that you get the right to individually make those decisions. Otherwise you end up like the woman I saw on the news last January I think it was, who had a baby in her apartment, put it in a plastic bag and threw it out the first story window where it landed near a dumpster or something, and they found it dead. She's going to jail for a long time, hopefully. Or, now I'm wrong there. See, I'm willing to admit I'm wrong. She should go to an institution where she gets help for a mental problem, and then once she's cured, she should sit in jail for a long time. I don't believe that just because you're crazy you don't pay for your mistakes. This idea, innocent by reason of insanity. No. That doesn't work. You still gotta pay for what you did when you're insane, you know. I don't know. Those are complicated issues. I'm not going to get into them here, but women aren't going to be allowed to to decide to commit murder. Okay, so you address the conservatives' problems, right? Now the problem I have with Jimmy Dore and Ron Paul is they both are liars. They're just bald-faced liars. They know that Bashar, the beast Bashar al-Assad, the dictator, the vicious, genocidal madman who rules Syria, would like to rule Syria with an iron fist. They both know that he's committing genocide and that he's using gas. I mean, he's used chlorine repeatedly, over and over again. I mean, you don't see it in the news, but he drops. Well, he hasn't since we've gone crazy about it, right? Since Duma, he's used it maybe 2 times, right? But the fact is the Duma thing is over. It's proven. It's a fact. He dropped chlorine gas on, a neighborhood, hit a building, killed a lot of people in the building, caused hundreds to go to the hospital. It was all very well documented. Okay, and the OPCW or whatever it is that they're talking about the report, and they claim the report was faked. It wasn't faked. The people who wrote the report just decided that this one guy who pointed out the fact that the casings for the bombs had been moved, because there were 2 of them. Well, the people who went in to look at the evidence, they didn't go in for 2 or 3 weeks because the Russians and the Syrians wouldn't let them in. And then the Russians and the Syrians took over the area where the bombs had been dropped. So, they had to make their report based on that. And they had Russians and Syrian thugs looking over their shoulders the whole time, and they weren't even allowed to go where the bombs were dropped. They said they had to sneak off, break off, and sneak. Some guy said, "We can show you right where the bomb was dropped," because the Syrians and the Russians wouldn't let them go there. They just kept screwing them around. So, to say that this report secretly said that there was, because that's what they say over and over again, right? They'll say suggests or something like that. But the fact is the people who wrote the report decided that the Assad regime did drop gas their own people. It did report that, and it decided that it would be misleading to put in this one guy's part of the report that said the bomb casings had been moved, because they decided that the bombs were dropped, and the fact that they were moved really had no influence over whether it was a false flag attack or not. Because they decided it wasn't a false flag attack. I mean, they had all the evidence that it really happened, and they had proof that once the Bashar, the Assad regime, and the Russians had gotten in there, that they had manufactured the narrative that there never were any bombs. they had gone in and grabbed the people whose kids had been filmed in the hospitals and stuff and really forced them, intimidated them into saying that, oh, we were part of a big conspiracy to make it look like the Assad regime dropped they gassed us. Okay? So we have proof of that. And if you don't know, go to The Intercept. If you don't know who The Intercept is, then you need to learn Glenn Greenwald and watch the report that they did on it. And it's easy to find. If you want me to show you, I can show you right now. So if you're on Facebook, you can go to Syria, Assad's Horror Machine, Shame of the West. And this is one of my groups. You can do it this way. And I think I may have it in the announcements, so let's look and see. Okay, it's not in the announcements. So I have it in. You may have to go a long ways down, but I would advise you to stop anywhere in here and watch these that I have. And this is on the United States bombing Raqqa. I strongly urge you to go watch that. Okay, here it is right here. So what really happened in Douma. And, go watch this video. It's on YouTube. It's called What Really Happened in Douma. It's by The Intercept. As a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and watch it right here. That way we just get it all right in here.
On the outskirts of Damascus. What's important about that for us, especially in a world where many people don't really care about Syria, is that 6 days afterwards, cruise missiles hit Syria from the American government. So whatever happened in Douma became a matter of geopolitical importance.
There were immediate claims from rebel activists and from civil defense workers in the area that there had seemed to be some sort of chemical attack, based on the fact that they found dozens of victims who seemed to be suffering the result of some sort of chemical exposure, foaming at the mouth, the corneas in their eyes, affected apparently by chemicals. Within 48 hours, the area fell from rebel hands and came under the control of the Russian government and the Syrian government. The Russian authorities said that the whole chemical attack was staged and that they could prove it.
We have undeniable evidence that this was yet another staged attack.
As a journalist, you should be questioning everyone. Do you trust an official line over an unofficial activist? Absolutely not. But does that mean you don't question what the activist tells you? No, you should also question what the activist tells you.
With Syria, we have a massive amount of open source information coming from groups on the ground. Very early on, kind of YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook became kind of the place to go for information from the conflict. Now, that was very much one-sided towards the opposition.
It's very distressing imagery and footage to see. But I feel like a lot of that was driven by a real, genuine belief from the protesters that if the outside world could only see what was happening to them, that it would make a change. This was not a place that has a tradition of free access for journalists, for local journalists or foreign journalists. You were sort of forced to rely more than probably most people would want to or would be comfortable on citizen journalists. What that means is you're relying on activists who have a point of view and have a goal. The young activists who were taking that footage, I could be proven wrong, but I detected not that much faking going on at the beginning. There was a lot of violence, so I don't think it was necessary to fake it. But I do know there have been examples over the years as the protests gave way basically to an armed rebellion and became like a bitter factional fight with lots of sides. I've definitely seen evidence that some footage has been faked.
The problem with this massive material on new media is that there are diamonds in there, but there is also plenty of rough. To find out who are the players, the propagandists, the information architects on all sides, that's a fascinating new process.
There's a lot of information out there if you only know how to look and combine and cross-reference. Architectural models are a very useful way to make sense of events that are captured by multiple sources. We place those photographs and videos within our models and use the model as a navigational tool to move between those sources and tell what has taken place. Now, the first question when you encounter a video coming from any social media platform is where and when was it shot? How can you geolocate it? How can you confirm the time when it doesn't have any metadata? We have various ways of doing it, from shadow analysis to investigating the kind of clouds that we see in an image.
So what we have in Douma is two impact sites. One is the balcony of the building where there was nearly all the casualties came from that building. Another is a bedroom where there's actually the remains of one of these bombs on the bed. What's really interesting on it is the actual metal frame that's on the outside. These are basically chlorine gas cylinders that have been retrofitted with these frames that allow them to act like bombs. They've got tail fins and other features.
What we've done is that we've collected a lot of images from around the gas canisters themselves, and we were able to create a navigable object, a 3D object.
So you can see there's this blackening on the nose of the canister, and that's actually caused by a chemical reaction between the chlorine gas and when the canister decompresses, rapid decompression causes it to cool down, and then condensation and eventually frosting appears on the surface. And when that melts, it reacts with the chlorine and it creates this kind of chemical effect. Another thing you can see on the surface is this kind of grid pattern, which is sort of emblazoned onto the canister. And we were able to measure the wire mesh fence on the site, and we found out that it was the same dimension as this grid we could see. So this kind of helped us to confirm that this canister had dropped through and hit this fence, which was located in a higher position before it struck.
The large question was whether the canister has arrived from the air, dropped from the air, exclusively controlled by the Syrians or Russian, or whether it was carried onto the site from the ground, as in the rebel forces having brought it and planted it there, as it was suggested or implied by the Russian news channel. And we did find a very strong indication that the canisters have arrived from the air. But we've also found evidence that some of the images were taken off canisters that have been moved. But here is a question. Who has moved it? We do not know. But that's something that is of grave concern.
The open source evidence from Douma, this horrible chemical attack on the 7th of April, comes from two very different places. It comes from a hospital, where you see lots of people wheezing, and then it comes from a building, where you see lots of people dead. And those things are often lumped together, but they're two different sites.
So about 2 weeks after the chemical attack in Douma, Russian state...
Okay, so the important thing here is this came out before the report was made public. So the fact is nobody was hiding the fact that the canisters had been moved. Now, what makes sense to me is I think they moved the canisters. I think they removed the canisters so that the Russians and the Syrians couldn't take them away. Because don't you think if the Russians took control of the place that they would have just taken the canisters? Right? I mean, they just take them. That way the news crews that come in, they don't have anything to show for it. Makes sense, right? So the people of Douma probably grabbed the canisters, hid them, and then put them back. That's what I think happened. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that probably You heard them talking right there. Those are the people from the OPCW. I think they are. I mean, they're talking to the people who investigated it, who went in. And, you know, did they get around to the part talking about how the Russians were looking over their shoulders and wouldn't allow them to go to the site? And that they had to break off? I wasn't paying attention. I was doing other stuff. Well, if they didn't get around to that, because I don't want to waste your time with the whole video. So, you know, so yeah, I think that, and you know, Jimmy Dore has kind of backed off since I've been raising hell with him. I have at least one other video where it's just about how he's a fucking dumb shit liar, you know, and it's just appalling that a progressive or progressives, there's a lot of progressives, and I'm a progressive, so it shits on me too. They come across to me as supporting this genocidal madman and supporting his government. You don't do that, man. You don't do that. That's just fucking abysmal. It's a lack of you know, of goodness. You're not being a good person. You can't support what the Syrian, what the Assads have done and the Alawites have done in Syria since the 1960s. I mean, this didn't start in 2011. I mean, they probably killed 100,000 people when they massacred everybody in Homs, Syria, back in the 70s or sometime. Go read the Wikipedia, you know. You can go, I'm not going to do it now. I was going to show you. You can go to Wikipedia and look up Assad, you know, Syria, whatever. Do your little searches, and you can read all about what this horrible Baathists, which is, you know, the Baathists were on the side of the Nazis. And by the way, the Palestinians, the PLO, were Baathists. You know, I mean, I'm not saying the Baathists and the PLO and everybody haven't done good things. Everybody does good things. But it's like when people talk about my dad. Yeah, he did a lot of good things. Are we going to pretend like he wasn't a bad guy? You know? Or, and of course I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about every government. And so, you know, you take like Saddam Hussein. He did a lot of good things for his people. He provided peace. You know, Iraq wasn't the hotbed of violence that it has been, and pretty much probably will become again. But that doesn't mean that you support him. You know, I don't mean, I don't believe we should have, I think that getting rid of him was the only good thing that came out of the Iraq War, but I don't think we should have done it. Although I would have supported a coalition. I'd support coalitions that go around the world removing dictators if the United States wasn't one huge dictatorship. You know, I mean, there's a difference between dictatorships that are born from an inability of the people of a country to protect itself from an empire. So like Cuba, even though what they have isn't really a dictatorship, I still support what happened there and the Castros, right? Because they're not in Nicaragua and in Venezuela, and if I could think of some other, maybe Nasser in Egypt. When you have a militancy growing out of oppression, that's entirely different from when you have the oppressors, the United States, going in and creating a dictatorship like the Shah in Iran, wherever, Peru, was it, Argentina, maybe, places around the world. I mean, you're talking about two totally different things. And whenever I look at the dictatorships created by the United States and Europe, basically white dictatorships, promoting the white expansion of the white race across the world, Manifest Destiny in the United States, in America, us wiping out the indigenous population. Whenever I see that, you see an enduring oppressive dictatorship. Whereas if you look at Nicaragua and Cuba, you see it's not even really a dictatorship rising up to free the people and free the country. And invariably, Cuba has a representative government, far more representative than we have here in the United States. The government in Cuba, as much as people jump up and down about Castro because they're propagandized, the government of Cuba is far more representative of its people, and it certainly, considering its resources, does a lot better job of actually taking care of its people. Right? So, two totally different things, right? So when you get, so you got these awful dictatorships like the Assad regime. It wasn't, the Assad regime wasn't born out of the people rising up and somebody representing them and militarily representing them and taking care of them. It was just people wanting to be rich and powerful, and that's how they got their Assad regime. So, Jimmy, you're trying to support a horrible dictator. And, your heart's in the right place. You don't want the United States sending American kids over there. And, there's two sides to that coin. If the United States were being attacked, would you be ready to defend it, or would you carry this anti-war sentiment so far that you get us toppled and knocked over, and us being the ones under oppression? So that's the tug of war that's going on, right? The anti-war movement versus the war mongers. And of course you want to be in the middle, right? Because being in the middle of that tug of war is the right place to be. Yes, you want to be able to protect your people, but no, you don't want to go around fucking with everybody. And I agree with you, Jimmy, on that. The problem with this is that you're becoming a liar in your zealous and your zealotry to protect your position. You're trying to say the Assad regime isn't gassing its own people when it has a repeated track record of doing exactly that. And you look stupid when you try to argue that it doesn't have that track record. You know, nobody's arguing with your position. I agree. I don't think we should be. I don't think there should be American troops or CIA, you know, whatever. You can call them anything you want. They can be any group of Americans, but they're American citizens, and they're over there. Now, is there times when American citizens should get involved? Well, possibly, yeah. I mean, what do you think foreign fighters are? We jump up and down about foreign fighters. What are they? They're people who are sitting in Lithuania or Norway or the United States. Yes, there's been Americans who've gone and fought for Al-Qaeda. There's Walker Lind or whatever his name is, and there's others who went over there and fought on that side. Why? Why? Why would somebody go risk their life? Why would somebody risk being labeled a traitor to the United States? Because they felt strongly, right? They saw the murder going on, whatever you want. You know, there's so many examples. I can't get into them all, but they saw total oppression, unfairness, murder, death, torture, whatever, right? And they decided that they felt so strongly about it that they went over there. You know, women went over there and married Islamic State in Syria, ISIS guys, and what have you, whatever. And we just flat out label them as terrorists, and therefore they just need to be put in jail and all this stuff. Well, no. So, so these people, you know, we need to look at their reasons. It's just like I advocate, and that doesn't mean sitting down and talking with horrible people. That doesn't mean sitting down and talking with the Assad regime. I mean, we should stay out of that and just from here say what we morally support or don't support. And I think we should morally support the people of Syria against the Assad regime. Absolutely. I mean, this Assad regime has been hoisted upon the Syrian people for over 50 years now. It's time to get rid of it. And I don't think that we should personally be in there doing it, but we should morally support the people against the Assad regime. You know, and I think guys like Jimmy Dore could do that if the U.S. wasn't running around the world meddling like we do. I think that if we didn't, you know, if we didn't bomb, and by the way, he complains that we're involved in Syria, and he complains that we're supporting Al-Qaeda, and yet we're bombing ISIS, which is the closest thing to Al-Qaeda in Syria. Al-Nusra, and especially the FSA, is nothing like Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda in Syria, if there is any, is Al-Qaeda in Iraq, moved into Syria. And Al-Qaeda in Iraq wasn't really Al-Qaeda. It was Iraq wanting to use a name that was scary, and representative of their feelings, which is to get the United States out of Iraq, right? It's complicated. I'm not going to get into the whole war. I do finally understand it. I got into it because it was so complicated that I couldn't understand it. So I got into studying it, and I studied and I studied and I studied and I still study. But as of about 6 months ago, I pretty much figured out exactly who the players are, what they're doing, and what's going on. So stop it, Jimmy. Stop it. Please stop it. Don't hide it in the very end. Here. This thing's over 30 minutes long, and here's where they hide their little bullshit lie.
Most people in this country now know that Iraq should have been fought because it was based on a lot of lies.
Okay, so, they're going to do the same thing they do every time. They're going to talk about a bunch of truth, this is a conservative trick. You say the truth, and then you throw in a lie like it's the same as the truth, and you get people to believe that it's the truth. So they're going to talk about Iraq real quick and then jump on Assad gassing his own people. And they're going to talk about the Gulf of Tonkin, which we know was a false flag operation of the United States government. And let's keep in mind something, okay? Keep this in mind. The United States doing false flag attacks and the Syrian rebels are two different groups. You're talking about the Syrian rebels doing false flag attacks, and you're talking about them gassing their own people. That's what you're trying to say. Now, the United States government would do something like that, but the Syrian people would not gas a bunch of their own people. And they don't have to, because the Assad regime is doing that very well. So that's what, that's the obscene, obnoxious comparison that Ron Paul and Jimmy Dore like to make. American false flag attacks, the Nazis burning the Reichstag. Oh, just because somebody did it once, and they were really abhorrent people, the Syrian rebels are doing it too. Oh, what a bullshit fucking argument, guys. Come on, people, wake up and smell the coffee. Jimmy Dore and Ron Paul don't know their ass from a hole in the ground, okay, when it comes to this shit right here. And probably will show us that they don't know their ass from a hole in the ground in other areas eventually. That's the way I see it. And that's one of the things that bothers me about the way they talk. And I'm glad we've got them both on here telling this lie right now.
Which is true. And now we're finding out about Syria, all this stuff about Assad gassed his own people. We're finding out that they're based on lies. Oh yeah.
Say it clearly, Ron Paul, that they're based on lies. They're not based on lies. You're the liar. You're the one lying here.
Let's go back a few years. How about the time I got drafted in 1962? It had to do with the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. And that was all based on lies too.
So because the United States lied in 1962 or whatever it was, the Syrian rebels are gassing their own people just to blame it on Assad to get the United States and Europe and other countries to help them fight their war. Okay. I'm sorry, man, but there's no way. This shit just doesn't fly. It's nonsense. Jimmy Dore, love your show, watch it all the time. When it comes to progressives, you're dead on. When it comes to covering the revolution, which isn't hard, right? All you have to do is just be a decent guy to admit that, progressive Democrats have that we're the rising, the good rising up to finally defeat conservatism and its evil side. We're the ones who, yes, we have to pound down the liberal Democrats, the establishment Democrats, just to get. I mean, can you imagine? It's like you're in a war and you're fighting to defeat the Nazis, but you have to destroy an entire regiment of American troops who stand in between you and the Nazis. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're beating the Democrat, the establishment down and climbing over them to get to the Republicans. We're showing them that they can't beat them. Not on their own, not without us, because we're the vast majority of the Democrats, and we're the vast majority of the people of America. The people of America are very much caring and loving people, so we are beating them. We're beating the establishment. All that's left of the establishment is their leaders. Their leaders stand on a little island, and we're the water rising, and we're gonna drown them. I obviously don't mean that literally. I mean that politically, and we're going to get rid of Pelosi and Schumer and all of them. If they survive, they'll probably survive kind of like Thurman and these conservative blue dogs survived for so long. They'll just be these kind of old voices sitting in the background that nobody pays attention to, because there is still a segment of the United States people who actually are racists and xenophobes. But we'll overcome them, and we will beat Republicans, because our message of educating everybody and running the country as an educated group of people, and people who aren't poor to the point where they're just practically brain dead and easy to manipulate. Our way of our message can beat the Republicans. I mean, how long are people going to continue to believe that racism and just oppression is the only way to effectively govern a country? And the fact is that the only reason that we have to oppress the people is because we have an oligarchy that is greedy and selfish and just looks after itself, which creates the animosity from the bottom up, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. So that's our point, is that we're going to get rid of what the people are complaining about. We're going to address the grievances. We should address everybody's grievances. Some people's grievances are going to be more legitimate than others, and by addressing them, that's how you determine that, right? So we'll get around all that. The Republicans say, shut the fuck up and sit down, to the grieving people. We don't care that you're suffering and poor and so, I mean, how hard is it to beat that message, right? Shut up and sit down, versus we want to hear what you have to say and address them legitimately. How? Who's going to win that argument, right? Who do you want in charge? I think I know. You want us. You want us to rule. This is Martin Drummond with Progressive News. Thanks for watching.